Up next, Meg Baxter is going to have a conversation with Mitchell Scholar alumna Jacqueline Martin. Jackie is the 2003 Mitchell Scholar from Stearns High School in Millinocket. She graduated with a degree in recreation from the University of Maine at Presque Isle and has worked in education ever since. Let's go over now to Meg and Jackie.
Thank you, Nate. We've been at this for over 25 years, so it should be no surprise that we have veteran alums throughout the state who are contributing in huge ways to their communities. We think about our work at the Institute in three ways: aspire, persist, connect. We want Maine students to aspire to a post-secondary education. We will help them persist to completion. And then we want to connect them to Maine as beacons of our future. Jackie is one of those alums, and we're so thrilled to have you here, Jackie. I know you grew up near Millinocket, and that your dad worked in the paper mills. So tell us a little bit about how you learned about the scholarship and how it helped you deal with college costs.
Absolutely. So my story with the Mitchell Institute started when I was in 8th grade. My sister was awarded the scholarship at her graduation. At that time, I didn't know all the details about what it meant to be a Mitchell Scholar, but I do remember that there was a tone of pride in my parents' voices when I heard them talk about my sister receiving it. And as my senior year in high school rolled around, scholarships were something my parents pushed me to apply for. I grew up in T1R9, technically, which is one of those unorganized territories just outside of Millinocket. My father had been employed in a paper mill since he graduated high school. He was an electrician, and he worked shift work. He worked a lot of overtime as much as he could to support our family, but he was laid off indefinitely just around the time I was wrapping up my high school years. At that time, I didn't quite grasp what this meant for our family financially, but it was made clear that I needed to apply for any scholarship that I could. My parents knew that every scholarship dollar would help make a difference on my path to continuing my education and also to my ability to thrive as a young adult on my own afterward with as little college debt as possible.
And look at the adult you've become. I know in talking with you that part of what was important to you in all of our programs and support was collaboration and connection. Can you tell us a little bit about how that has affected you?
Absolutely. So my parents' push to help me land on my feet connected me with this resource with Mitchell Institute that would help me find my footing as I started life on my own. So it started when I attended the Scholar Welcome Brunch the summer after I graduated. I was honored to meet Senator Mitchell that day. And I keep this photo, you can see it displayed, this photo in my office, displayed for my students to see. It's framed on my shelf. But I also had the good fortune that day of meeting Christy, who was a Mitchell Scholar. We were seated by the college we were planning to attend, and she and I were the only two scholars planning to stick it out north of Ordinary at the University of Maine in Presque Isle. And we connected right away. That year, I ate home-cooked meals at her family table in Washburn, and I knew I had a family that I could call if I needed. Christy and I attended a couple mile weekends together, where we got to know other scholars and build our network of connections. And this may be the single biggest advantage of being a Mitchell Scholar, was learning how to interact with new people and gain a network to call upon. So I doubled down on the offer from the Mitchell Institute to learn networking skills. And I've built myself a personal and professional web of connections that have helped me succeed to this point.
And look at you now. You live in Fort Fairfield in Aroostook County. You are in the county.
I am in the county, yes. Since I graduated from UMPI, I stayed in the area despite a solemn vow to my 18-year-old self that I would not stay there a day after graduation. Yet, there I am. So I've lived up in Fort Fairfield in Aroostook County for over 15 years now. So we're in a county about the size of Delaware and Rhode Island combined, and in that space we have about 70,000 people. So we're spread out, our communities are small, and what I came to realize quite quickly in the early years of my professional career is that there's no way to get anything done alone in the county.
I really agree, and I think it's true of Maine. You know, we're so big geographically, but so small in terms of population. We can't afford to work alone or to leave anybody out. And we all know that there are significant differences across all the geographic areas of Maine. So can you give us a little sense of what it's like where you are 5 hours away from here in terms of what some of the hurdles are that you and your students face?
Absolutely. The differences were clear to me as I drove here today. It's been so long since I've been able to travel, and, driving to Portland today from Aroostook County just really highlighted the differences as I traveled south. So as a school counselor, networking has always been a critical component of my strategies. So I began working at Fort Fairfield Middle High School a decade ago when I was doing my practicum for my master's degree. And it was then that I realized that we needed to do more than to serve the students who are already firmly on their path to a traditional four-year degree experience. So our district has a free and reduced lunch population of greater than 65%. So that means that more than 65% of students live in families that struggle to put food on the table. They struggle to maintain adequate housing that remains warm during our really long, cold winters. And they struggle to access health care and prevention services on a regular basis. So that's a significant part of our population. So we've supported students whose homes have burned down in the middle of the night, on a below zero night, when they resorted to heating with electric heat because they ran out of oil. I've had students who come to my office daily for snacks because their family padlocks their cupboards and their fridge to ration their food. We've had a diabetic student whose parent never got testing supplies and refused to allow our nurse to monitor their child's glucose numbers. And I work with many students, especially now in the last year and a half, who aren't even able to come to school because their families need them to stay home to maybe help with a sick sibling or a sibling who's quarantined so that the parents can go to work and still earn that paycheck for the family. So as a school counselor, it's my job to address three areas: the academic success, the social and emotional health, and the career and college readiness of all our students. I quickly learned that I wasn't going to be able to do that alone, so I put my networking skills to use. I started to identify community partners. On top of academics, these kids needed our help to learn what opportunities await them after high school and how to be prepared. They needed exposure to employers who are hiring. They also needed to know how to identify their own skills and even to practice shaking hands in a professional way. So many of our students don't see themselves as college material. Some don't know how they could ever pay for college, pay for their education, even the most affordable education that we have available, like NMCC right in the town next door. So I found that collaboration is key to supporting these students in high school and helping them realize the potential within themselves. And the Mitchell Institute has helped me keep a theme of community in the forefront of my work. So most recently, I worked with a colleague in another industry to think big and secure a grant for a newly developed career lab at our school, where students are trying new things in relation to their career and their future aspirations. So I'm now in communication with a number of businesses in the area to support our project, and in turn making time for these employers to come meet directly with our students. So we're bridging a gap. We're building this as a prototype that can be replicated in any school. And the lab will help students start to learn at a younger age the skills that I found so beneficial as a Mitchell Scholar. It's that connection, that collaboration, and the networking.
Wow, that lab sounds like such a great undertaking, and it's great for the scholars, but for your students, but it's also great for the employers. I mean, pre and post-pandemic, that's such a huge issue for employers to be able to find the employees that they want. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to affect the resilience of the communities. But I think another thing that we have to talk about is how we've all been affected by COVID and what it's been like for you as an educator, the amount of pivoting you've had to do. Tell us a little bit about how that's affected your work and your students.
I'm going to tell you a little bit because we don't have enough time to go over.
I bet.
But it probably doesn't come as a surprise that the last 18 months in education have been rough from my perspective. In 2020, I couldn't see a way to adapt my counseling program in a way that would gain the same outcome as it did pre-pandemic. And as an educator, that's really hard to come to terms with. Educators, we're used to being charged with the impossible, yet we make it happen day after day. But the chaotic landscape of COVID, it pushed us to our limits almost immediately. So professionally, my strategy, I hunkered down. And I just kind of waited for the threat to pass. But as I sit here today, it still hasn't passed. So, once we even returned into our own building, my office had been moved to what was used to be the in-school suspension room. So I wasn't even allowed to have students wandering in to say hello and, to grab that Jolly Rancher out of our candy dish, which would, always turn into them sharing their struggles and their worries. And we'd have a, productive conversation. That stopped. I only communicated with my students through email. So being an educator in a world ruled by COVID restrictions, it tested me. It's tested my colleagues for sure. I work in Fort Fairfield. It's friendly Fort Fairfield. Literally, that's the motto on the sign when you drive into town. We're great people. And our kids, they still work in the fields this time of year, not in the droves that they did before mechanized harvesters. But our students are still out there. They're caked in potato dust in September and October. But even working in a school system that's full of good, honest, hardworking people, the past year and a half has taken a significant toll on us. Educators are we're in survival mode. We're always looking over our shoulder, wondering when the next shoe is going to drop. And our those collaborative classrooms that we've been working so hard to build have turned into rooms full of silent individuals with their heads in their laptops. It's been discouraging, to say the least, and not just for educators. Students are somewhat discouraged. They're ready to learn with each other again, not in isolation. And I'm pretty sure that parents are they're just ready for their kids to be back in school full-time, consistently.
Says the mother of two.
I can say for that, personally, I'm ready for my kids just to be in a predictable schedule, right? But we do have, I see signs of hope. I was driving home from work one day last spring and pulled a minivan over to the side of the road because they were planting a field. And I got out with my daughter to watch. One of our recent graduates was working for his family farm and was behind the wheel of a huge John Deere tractor planting. So Piper and I actually got to get out and were invited into the John Deere, and we got to ride along and plant a few rows with this student who had just graduated. And this was a tough kid. He was resistant to support from school for his post-secondary plans. But that day he drove this massive family tractor with pride, and he was telling me all about the ratios of seed to fertilizer and the variety of potato being planted and how his GPS system works. And there wasn't a question that I asked this kid. I asked a lot of questions that day, but there wasn't a question I asked him that he couldn't answer. And he also shared with me how he ended up following through on attending college despite COVID. He did so 100% remotely for his first 2 semesters. And he earned some of the best grades he ever has, including in 2 challenging calculus classes online.
That is such a great story, and the great image of the potato fields and how he found his space, even while he's continuing to work the family farm. Can you tell us a little bit about, from your perspective, how the Institute can continue to invest in students?
I mean, I feel like I have a unique perspective as a scholar and also working directly with students who are graduating. So more than ever, the support from organizations such as the Mitchell Institute is so important, because financial need is it's one part of the picture. It's actually not the biggest part. It's one part. The check without the additional support, it's a vote of confidence. It's a check mark, but it's not an investment. So investments in our students is the active, ongoing coaching that the Mitchell Institute provides its scholars. It's the friendly emails. It's the network of professionals available, just one phone call away. Or the enriching experience of taking a whitewater rafting trip, enjoying a new place in Maine, learning from others along the way. And I think we have to continue to invest in our students, to give them the opportunities to shine, to build their networks, and to continue the hopeful work of improving their own communities. Working in a school now, as a scholar myself, I feel definitely a level of responsibility to the Institute for gathering the best pool of candidates that I feel will be a great fit for this. Those who will benefit financially and will be open to the networking opportunities and leadership experiences. So when I get butterflies, when I see the email in my inbox announcing which of our students has been chosen, and just hoping it will be a student that I have in mind. And every year, I'm so pleased. The recipients, they're always the students they're not just strong academically. They're the shining stars in our schools, who are smart and motivated, but they also have infallible character. So with its broad reach in every school in Maine, the Mitchell Institute, I have complete faith that it's finding the best of the best in all of our schools and all of our students throughout Maine. So I can say the opportunities presented to me as a result of the scholarship have made a difference in my life, and I continue to see it make a difference in the lives of my students, as well as the Mitchell Scholars that I get to work with as part of the Mile Leadership Weekends when I get to guide them on whitewater rafting trips. You know, it's not always immediately visible, but so much of education is an investment. It's long term. You don't see the growth and benefit until years later. So please continue to invest your time, your talents into our youth in any way you can. Students need your support. They need mentorship. Education needs your support as community members and business owners. Aroostook County is where I learned that partnership and collaboration is key, but I can say without a doubt that it's imperative to any successful endeavor in education, no matter your location in Maine. So thank everyone for being part and joining us tonight.
Wow. Here's a perfect example of why we love your support. You're making such a great impact with your students, with your community. We're so very proud of you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.